Jasper Hale realized he was on the wrong train the moment the doors slammed shut and the announcement overhead called out a line he'd never heard of. "Why the hell are we going uptown?" he muttered, tugging at the sleeve of his Italian wool coat as he glanced around the packed car. No assistant, no driver, no security detail. Just him, a dead phone battery, and a subway line that smelled like metal and regret. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, trying to remember the last time he'd actually taken public transportation. College? Maybe. The train jerked forward, and Jasper stumbled into a woman standing near the door. She caught his arm quickly, steadying him before he could hit the pole with his shoulder. "Whoa, you okay?" she asked, her voice a little breathless but steady. Jasper straightened, meeting her eyes. Hazel. Sharp, framed by thick lashes and a mess of curly dark hair pulled into a bun that looked like it had been surviving the day on sheer willpower. Yeah, sorry," he said, brushing off the front of his coat. "Wrong train." She quirked a brow. "You don't say. You look like you belong on a yacht, not the Q line." He blinked. "I was trying to catch the express downtown. Ended up on this one instead." She tilted her head. "You took the Q instead of the 4 or 5. Rookie mistake. You're gonna end up in Queens if you're not careful. I was supposed to get off at Union Square. I have a meeting." "Not anymore, you don't," she said, glancing at the next stop coming up. "But if you get off at the next station, I can show you how to switch. I'm heading that way anyway." He hesitated. She nodded toward the doors. "Unless you want to end up in Coney Island." Jasper let out a low laugh. "Lead the way then." The train screeched to a stop and she stepped off, turning to make sure he followed. He did, easily keeping pace beside her. She moved fast, weaving through the crowd, her canvas tote bouncing against her hip. "I'm Jasper," he said as they headed toward another platform. "Brielle," she answered without looking at him. "Brielle Winters." He liked the way her name sounded. Simple, clean. Nothing fake about it. "You always help clueless men in overpriced coats on the subway?" he asked. She shot him a quick glance. "Only when they look like they're one stop away from a nervous breakdown." "I was not having a breakdown. You looked like you were about to call your lawyer." He huffed out a laugh. "I would've if my phone wasn't dead." They reached the platform for the 4 train and Brielle stopped, pointing toward the route map. "This'll get you where you need to go. Union Square's only 3 stops. He looked down at her. "You know the city like the back of your hand." "I've lived here my whole life," she said. "You moved here after college." "But I've never taken the subway. My assistant usually," he caught himself. "I usually drive." She eyed him. "You don't look like a guy who does his own driving." He offered a small smile. "Today's been unusual." The train rumbled in and passengers spilled out. Brielle stepped back, letting them pass. "Well," she said, "here's your ride." He didn't move. "You're not getting on?" Jasper hesitated. He didn't want to. He didn't want to walk into that meeting, into that stuffy boardroom with its fake smiles and backhanded compliments. And he didn't want to stop talking to her. "Actually," he said, "I've already missed the meeting. Maybe I'll catch the next one." She raised an eyebrow. "You're gonna skip it?" "Just like that." He shrugged. "I think I'd rather get coffee." "Do I look like your personal tour guide?" "No. You look like someone who knows the best coffee shop in a 10-block radius." She laughed, and this time it wasn't sarcastic. "Fine. But only because the place I like has these cinnamon croissants that are basically illegal." "Lead the way." The cafe was tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore with scratched wooden tables and a chalkboard menu that listed things like lavender lattes and rosemary mochas. Jasper followed her to a corner table, watching the way she greeted the barista by name, the way she dropped her tote to the floor and pulled a notebook out like she lived there. "You come here a lot?" he asked. "Every day. I work from here when I'm not at the studio." "You're an artist?" "Graphic designer," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "But I paint too. On weekends." He leaned back. "That's cool." She looked at him, really looked at him this time. "Okay, spill it. Who are you really?" He blinked. "Excuse me. No phone. No MetroCard. You talk about assistants and meetings like you're running a Fortune 500 company. And that coat? Pretty sure I saw it in some runway show." He gave her a crooked smile. "You're observant. Comes with living in the city." So? He folded his hands on the table. Jasper Hale? CEO of HaleTech. Her mouth parted slightly. Wait, the HaleTech? The tech company with the smart glasses and that AI software? That's the one. She blinked. You're a billionaire? Technically. Brielle stared at him for a second, then slowly leaned back in her chair. Well, that explains a lot. You're not going to freak out? Why would I? It's not like you offered to buy the place and rename it after me. He laughed again, shaking his head. You're not what I expected. Good, she said. Because you're not what I expected either. They sat there, the sounds of espresso machines and indie music filling the space between them. He watched her sketch something absently in her notebook, a skyline, maybe. She didn't ask for anything. Didn't try to impress him. She just was. And for the first time in months, Jasper didn't feel like he was pretending. Didn't feel like the title and the money were swallowing him whole. He leaned forward. What are you doing tomorrow? She looked up. Why? Because I think I'd really like to see you again. Her lips curved into a smile. I think I'd really like that too. He reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly over hers. And just like that, the wrong train had taken him to exactly the right person. Jasper was 20 minutes late to his own advisory board dinner and couldn't bring himself to care. Not when his mind was still stuck 2 neighborhoods away in a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and paint water across from a woman who hadn't blinked when he told her his net worth could vault her into a new tax bracket. He'd replayed the quiet weight of her fingers under his, the way her eyes narrowed slightly when she was curious but didn't want to admit it. She'd agreed to see him again but hadn't offered her number. If you want to find me, she'd said, you know where I'll be. Then she'd tucked her pencil behind her ear and disappeared into the street like she belonged to it. Now, seated at a long, glossy table in a private room at Le Patre Noir, Jasper sipped a glass of wine that cost more than most people's rent and barely heard a word of the conversation. Jasper, the investors are pushing for the beta launch to move up by 6 weeks, said Lawrence, his CFO, voice pinched from too many late nights and too many double espressos. If we don't meet it, there's talk of pulling Series G. Jasper leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. No. We're not rushing the product to meet someone else's calendar. We do that and we spend the next year fixing the fallout. Across the table, a woman in a white blouse too stiff to wrinkle gave a pointed smile. We know you're deliberate, Jasper, but this market won't wait forever. Jasper's jaw flexed. And I don't build things to last a quarter. I build them to last decades. There was a pause, then the waiter refilled his glass with silent precision. The conversation shifted, but Jasper remained half listening. He could still hear Brielle's voice in his head. The way she'd said his name like it wasn't a headline. Like it was just a name. It wasn't until the third course, a delicate risotto with black truffle and something that looked like edible gold, that he excused himself. He stepped out into the corridor, tugging his phone from his pocket. Fully charged now. Dozens of missed calls and texts. He scrolled past them all and stared at the blank contact screen. He didn't know her last name. Not completely. She'd said Winters, but she hadn't spelled it, hadn't given him anything more. No address. No handle. But she'd left him a map, hadn't she? If you want to find me, you know where I'll be. The next morning, Jasper arrived at the cafe just after it opened, the sun barely up over the skyline. He ordered a coffee he didn't drink and took the table in the corner where she'd sat yesterday. By 10, she still hadn't come. By noon, he'd canceled 2 meetings and sent his assistant a curt message, hold everything. I'll call when I'm ready. At 1, the door opened and Brielle walked in, scarf looped loosely around her neck, cheeks flushed from the cold. She stopped short when she saw him. You came back, she said. You told me where to find you. She walked over slowly, eyeing the untouched coffee still on the table. You've been here a while. I wanted to prove I wasn't bluffing. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat. You couldn't have just sent someone to track me down? I could've, he said. But then I wouldn't get to see what kind of face you make when I show up uninvited. She tilted her head. You're persistent. I'm curious. About what? You, he said simply. She looked down at her hands. Paint smudged her knuckles. You're not used to wanting things you can't immediately buy, are you? He didn't answer. Not because she was wrong, she wasn't, but because it had never occurred to him that someone would say it out loud. She glanced up. "So what exactly are you hoping happens here?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But I'd like to find out." She leaned back in her chair, studying him. "I don't do casual. Neither do I. And I don't do performative dating. Rooftop dinners with violinists and paparazzi." "That's oddly specific," he said, amused. She shrugged. "I've worked with rich clients before. I know the type." "And what type am I?" "That's what I'm figuring out." He liked that she hadn't made up her mind, that she wasn't falling at his feet. It made him want to earn it. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "Where?" "Somewhere you've never been." She blinked. "Is this the part where you take me to some private island?" "Not yet." She laughed under her breath. "You're serious? I'll have you back by dinner." She hesitated, then slowly stood. "Fine. But I'm not changing." He looked at her jeans and boots, the faint smear of blue paint on her coat sleeve. "You look perfect." He didn't take her to a penthouse or a yacht. He took her to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where the winter greenhouse was warm and quiet and smelled like damp earth and blooming citrus. She stared at the orange trees in stunned silence as they walked through. "I've lived in this city 28 years, she whispered. "And I've never been here." "That's what I was counting on." She looked up at him, eyes softer now. "Why this place?" "Because it's the only place I know where time slows down." They wandered for over an hour, speaking in low voices. She told him about her father, who'd been a city bus driver and taught her how to fix things when they broke. He told her about his mother, who used to keep a garden on their Manhattan balcony no wider than a doorway. "You're different here," she said as they passed a wall of blooming orchids. "How so?" "Quieter. Like you're not trying to be anything." "I'm not. I like it." He stopped walking, looked at her. "I like you." She didn't look away. "That's flattering." "It's also true." "Then maybe I'll let you keep proving it," she said, turning away again, but not fast enough to hide the smile tugging at her lips. They took the long way back. He didn't order a car. They walked even as the wind picked up and the sky threatened snow. She didn't complain. She asked questions, tough ones. "What happens when your world pulls you back under again?" "Then I'll fight to stay above it." "And when someone tells you I'm not good enough for you?" "I'll remind them I don't answer to anyone." "And when I tell you I don't want to be your secret?" "I'll make you the headline." "You really think that's how it works?" "I think," he said, pausing at a crosswalk, "that if something matters enough, you make it work." She looked at him then, really looked. "We'll see." He wanted to kiss her. He didn't. She wasn't ready. But she didn't walk away when he touched her hand again. Didn't flinch when his fingers threaded through hers. By the time they reached the cafe, it was dusk. She stood at the door, watching him. "You're not what I expected either," she said. Then she went inside, leaving the door open just long enough for him to know he was welcome to follow, just not yet. Jasper walked into his penthouse and didn't turn on the lights. The city glittered below, skyscrapers slicing through the early evening mist, but he didn't glance at them. Instead, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his coat still on, and listened to the silence. It was a silence that used to comfort him, a symbol of control, of peace earned by long hours and billion-dollar deals. But now it rang hollow. His phone buzzed on the marble counter. He ignored it. He already knew what it would be: another meeting request, another status report, another reminder that Hale Tech was a machine and he was just the engine expected to run nonstop. But all he could think about was the way Brielle's breath had fogged the window of that greenhouse, the way her eyes had softened when she traced the shape of a leaf with her fingertip. She had let him in just a little, and that sliver of trust felt more valuable than the largest deal he'd ever closed. The next morning, the building's doorman looked surprised when Jasper exited wearing jeans and a dark jacket instead of a suit. "Heading out, Mr. Hale?" he asked. Jasper nodded. "Just walking today." He made it 3 blocks before pulling out his phone and calling his assistant. "I need something," he said as soon as she picked up. "A studio. Art supplies. Everything. Can you find out what kind of space an artist would kill for and book it for the next 3 months?" There was a pause. "An artist? Not just any artist. Her name is Brielle Winters. She works in design, but she paints. I want to give her a space to do both." His assistant hesitated. Would you like me to schedule a meeting with her? Or deliver? No, he interrupted. No contact from the company. I'll give it to her myself. Understood. He ended the call and kept walking, not toward the cafe this time, but toward a street he remembered her mentioning once, something about a mural she'd worked on during college. It took an hour, but he found it. A faded cityscape splashed across the brick side of a library, its skyline warped and dreamlike. Her initials were painted in the corner, barely visible. He stood staring at it until someone tapped his shoulder. You look like you're casing the place, she said, stepping beside him. He turned. I was hoping I'd find you here. I come here when I need a reminder, she said, tucking her hands into her coat pockets. That I used to dream bigger. You still do, he said quietly. Not lately. Then maybe it's time someone reminded you. She looked at him, guarded but intrigued. And you think that someone's you? I found you, didn't I? She exhaled slowly, her breath curling in the cold air. You're persistent. I've been called worse. She studied the mural again. I was 19 when I painted this. Thought I was going to change the city. You still might. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. I don't want to just take you to nice places, Brielle. I want to build you one. Her brow lifted. What does that mean? He reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a key card and a printed address. I had a space set up for you. Natural light, high ceilings, state-of-the-art equipment. No branding, no strings. She looked up. You bought me a studio? I leased one. It's yours for as long as you want it. That's not a small gesture. I'm not a small gesture kind of person. She narrowed her eyes. What do you want in return? Nothing, he said. But I was hoping you'd let me see what you make there. She stared at the card, unsure. I don't know if I can accept this. Then come see it before you decide. Reluctantly, she agreed. The studio was on the 4th floor of a converted warehouse in Soho, just outside the noise but close enough to feel alive. When she walked in, the expression on her face shifted from suspicion to disbelief. The space was flooded with sunlight from giant windows. Easels stood ready beside shelves stocked with brushes, pigments, and sketchbooks. There was even a section with an industrial printer and design monitors, tailored for digital work. She turned in a slow circle. I wanted to give you room, he said, to do whatever the hell you want. She stepped toward the windows. No one's ever done something like this for me. Then they've been idiots. She shook her head. You don't even know what I'll make. I don't care. I just know it'll be yours. She looked at him, her voice quieter now. You're making it really hard not to like you. Then stop trying. She laughed, and it wasn't guarded anymore. They spent the next few hours in the studio. He watched her open jars of pigment like they were treasure chests. She didn't start painting, not yet, but he could see something shifting in her, the way her fingers itched to create again, the way her eyes flicked across the blank canvas like it was calling her home. Later, they walked out together. She didn't ask him to stay, but she didn't rush away either. At the corner, she paused. You could have just taken me to another garden. I didn't want to impress you, he said. I wanted to matter. She looked down at the key card still in her hand. You might have gotten both. The next week, Jasper found himself rearranging his entire schedule. Mornings that used to start with bored calls were now spent watching Brielle sketch at the studio. Evenings that once ended in black tie events now ended with her curled on his couch, flipping through art books and drinking wine out of mismatched glasses. He didn't tell anyone about her. Not yet. It wasn't because he was ashamed, far from it, but because it felt like something real, something he needed to protect from the headlines and the noise. But the world had a way of intruding, even on the things he guarded most. It started with a photo. He didn't see the camera. Neither did she. They had been walking out of the studio, laughing about something he couldn't even remember what when someone snapped the shot. By the time he got to the office the next day, it was everywhere. Tech Billionaire's secret muse? Unknown artist seen with Hale Tech CEO. Who is Brielle Winters? He shut the door to his office and called her. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. I saw it, she replied. 3 people sent it to me. I didn't want this. I know. He could hear the quiet tension in her voice. I can fix it, he offered. I'll release a statement. We'll block the press. No, she said. Don't hide me. He blinked. What? I don't want this attention, but I'm not afraid of it either. If we're doing this, whatever this is, then I'm not going to be the girl you keep in the background. He felt something shift in his chest. You won't be. You say that now, she said, voice low. But I've seen what happens when the world gets involved. People like me don't usually survive it. You're not just surviving, he said. You're rewriting the rules. She didn't answer right away. I want to see you, he said. I have a canvas drying, she replied softly. But after that, I want to see you too. He exhaled, the weight in his chest easing just slightly. Then let's stop running from it, he said. Let's give them something worth writing about. And for the first time, he wasn't just navigating his world, he was opening the door to hers. Brielle stepped into the gallery with her shoulders squared and her jaw set. The walls were bare, the lighting crews still adjusting the overhead track lights, and the scent of fresh paint clung to the air like anticipation. She paused in the center of the space, turning slowly to take it in. It wasn't the kind of gallery that usually showed untested artists, especially not ones who hadn't exhibited in years, but Jasper hadn't let her say no. I didn't ask for a show, she'd said when he first brought it up. You didn't have to, he'd replied. You're ready. She was. Maybe. Probably. The truth was, the past several weeks in the studio had unearthed something in her she thought she'd buried. Not just her creative instinct, but her willingness to be seen. Her work wasn't safe or pretty anymore, it was raw, vivid, tangled in emotion. She'd painted without censoring herself, and now those pieces would be hanging on these walls for strangers to judge. You're early, said a voice behind her. She turned to find Jasper stepping inside, his tie loosened, hair windblown. He looked out of place in the industrial space, too polished, too sharply defined, but somehow right at the same time. Like he belonged wherever she was. I wanted to see it before everyone else filled it up, she said. He approached slowly, gaze sweeping over the walls. In 24 hours, this room will be full of people pretending they always believed in you. I'm not sure I even believe in me. He stopped in front of her. You don't have to. I believe in you enough for both of us. She searched his face, trying to read the thing he wasn't saying. You've done a lot for me, Jasper. More than I ever expected. But tomorrow night it's not about you proving something. I know. I need it to be mine. It is, he said. Every inch of it. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't touch her at all. He just stood there, steady and still, letting her breathe the moment in. Later that night, she stared at the blank ceiling of her apartment, unable to sleep. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and for a moment she thought about ignoring it. But then she saw Jasper's name and picked it up. I can't stop thinking about what you said, he said as soon as she answered. You're supposed to be sleeping. I don't sleep much. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her. Is that because of me? No, he said. It's because I keep wondering how I'm supposed to go back to the way things were before I met you. Her throat tightened. You don't have to. I want to come over. It's almost midnight. I know. Her voice dropped. Then come. The knock on her door came less than 20 minutes later. She opened it to find him standing there with his jacket in one hand and a single white tulip in the other. I stopped by the market, he said. It felt wrong to show up empty-handed. She reached for the flower, brushing his fingers. You didn't have to bring anything. I know. But I wanted to. He stepped inside, and the moment the door closed behind him, the distance they'd both carefully maintained dissolved. She reached for him just as he cupped her face, and when his mouth met hers, it was slow and deep and unshakably sure. No hunger. No rush. Just the quiet kind of certainty that came from knowing you were exactly where you were supposed to be. They didn't say much after that. She led him to the couch, and they sat with limbs tangled and hearts exposed, letting silence say what words couldn't. The next night, the gallery buzzed with energy. Jasper arrived late on purpose, letting her have the spotlight without him casting a shadow over it. When he finally entered, he didn't announce himself. He stood in the back, watching as Brielle moved through the crowd, her hair pinned up, her dress simple but striking. She was radiant. A woman near him whispered, "That's her. The girl he's been seeing." She's the reason he canceled that investor trip to Zurich. Jasper didn't correct her. He didn't care who knew. When Brielle saw him, her face lit up in a way that made the room disappear. She crossed to him without hesitation. "You're late," she said, voice low. "You're glowing." "They love it," she said, gesturing toward the paintings. "They're actually buying them. They're finally seeing what I saw the first day." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Thank you for not making this about you. I'd never steal your thunder." "You could though," she said. "If you wanted to." He shook his head. "I'd rather stand beside it." They stayed like that for a moment, the hum of conversation around them fading. Then a man approached them, older, with a butter-colored blazer and a portfolio under his arm. "Ms. Winters, I represent a collective in Paris. We'd love to feature your work in our fall showcase. The theme is urban isolation. Your Glass City series is exactly the kind of emotional realism we're looking for." Brielle blinked. "Paris?" Jasper squeezed her hand. She turned to him, searching his face. "That's a big deal. You should do it. I'd have to be gone for months." "I'll visit. You don't even take the subway. How are you with planes?" "I have one," he said. "We'll manage." She laughed, a little breathless. "You're serious?" "I want you to go," he said. "I'll be right here when you come back." Her eyes glistened. "What if I don't want to leave you behind?" "Then take me with you." "You'd really do that?" "For you." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. In a heartbeat. The gallery faded again, the noise, the lights, the pressure. All that remained was the quiet pull between them, steady, sure, unbreakable. Weeks passed. The Paris trip was confirmed, but not immediate. They had time days filled with laughter, art, and unexpected quiet. Jasper brought her to a vineyard upstate one weekend, surprising her with a private dinner under string lights in the middle of a dormant orchard. She painted him once his profile, shadowed and thoughtful, and hung it in the corner of her studio, unsigned. He never asked her to explain it. He just looked at it sometimes when she wasn't watching. On their last night before she left, Jasper hosted a dinner on the rooftop of his building. Just them. No staff. He cooked badly, and they laughed at the burnt edges of the lasagna. When dessert came, it was a single slice of cheesecake with a tiny velvet box on the plate. Her breath caught. Jasper. He didn't get on one knee. He didn't give a speech. He just opened the box and held it out. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a sapphire in the center. "I'm not asking you to marry me now," he said. "But I am asking if you believe in us enough to come back." She stared at him, chest rising and falling. "I don't need promises," he said. "Just a yes." She picked up the ring, slipped it onto her finger. "Yes." He smiled, and this time he did kiss her soft and slow, the way someone kisses the person they've chosen for the rest of their life. 6 months later, she returned from Paris to find the studio still hers, untouched. Her painting had been featured on the cover of an international arts journal, and Jasper had met her at the airport with flowers and a new set of keys. "What are these?" she asked. He handed her a folded document. "The studio's yours now. Permanently. You bought it. I wanted a place that would always be waiting for you." Brielle stared at the keys, then looked up at him. "I'm not going to disappear." "I know," he said. "But just in case, I wanted the city to hold a piece of you." They stood on the sidewalk, traffic rushing by, but neither of them moved. "You really took the wrong train that day," she said. He smiled. "Or maybe I took the only one that mattered." And when he kissed her again, it wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything. The morning Brielle officially moved into Jasper's penthouse, she arrived with nothing more than 2 suitcases and a rolled-up canvas she refused to let the movers touch. The rest of her belongings, books, kitchen things, her mismatched collection of mugs would follow later, but she didn't seem bothered by the delay. "This place is too clean," she said, setting her bags down in the entryway. He watched her walk through the space like she was conducting a silent inspection. She stopped at the window that overlooked the skyline, her reflection framed against the glass. "I like clean," he said, stepping behind her. "That's because you've never lived with someone who leaves paintbrushes in the sink and forgets to buy paper towels for 3 weeks. I'll adapt." "You say that now. I mean it." She turned to face him, her lips tugging to the side. I don't think you've ever had to adapt to anyone, Jasper. I never wanted to before. She didn't answer that, but he saw her throat shift as she swallowed. She was still getting used to all of it, the space, the silence, the sudden absence of her tiny apartment's creaky floors and upstairs neighbor who played the trumpet at odd hours. But she was here, and that meant everything. That night she cooked. He tried to help, but she chased him out of the kitchen after he nearly burned the garlic. I'm not letting you ruin the first meal in our new home, she said, tossing chopped herbs into a pan with practiced ease. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I thought you didn't like labels. This isn't a label, she said. It's a meal. And it's ours. Later, after they'd eaten on the terrace under soft string lights he'd had installed without telling her, they curled up on the outdoor sofa with a blanket and a bottle of wine, watching the city breathe. Do you ever miss the way things were before me? She asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. He turned to her, brushing a hand through her curls. You mean when I was pretending late-night meetings were fulfilling and empty penthouses felt like success? She didn't look away. Yes. No, he said. Not even a little. In the weeks that followed, they built a rhythm that neither of them had expected but both fell into effortlessly. Jasper took fewer off-site meetings. He started sketching with her sometimes, badly, but she never laughed. She taught him how to blend colors, how to see the way light changed a surface. He taught her how to write a business proposal, how to build a licensing plan for her artwork without compromising her soul. She didn't ask for his help. He never offered unless she did. They stayed in their own lanes, but now and then they crossed over, and it worked. Still, the world outside hadn't forgotten about them. One morning, shortly after her first Paris piece was picked up by a major corporate buyer, Jasper's publicist requested a meeting. She's getting attention, the woman said, sliding a folder across the table. Good attention. But we need to shape the narrative before someone else does. Jasper didn't even open it. No, you haven't even looked. I'm not turning her into a brand. She's dating the CEO of one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. She already is one. She's not a product. She's a story. And people want to hear it. That's up to her, he said, standing. And if she doesn't want to be anyone's story, I'll make sure she never has to be. When he told Brielle later that night, she leaned against the kitchen counter and stared at him in silence. You really turned them down? She asked. Without a second thought. She looked at him for a long moment, then walked over, slid her arms around his waist, and rested her head on his chest. He felt her breathe in. No one's ever protected my silence before, she said. He held her tighter. But not everything could be protected forever. 3 days before her solo show at a gallery in Tribeca, a tabloid ran an old grainy phone shot of Brielle standing outside a courthouse. The headline was ugly, the story worse. It dug into her past, into the legal battle she'd fought years ago when a former client had stolen one of her early designs and sold it to a major fashion brand. She'd sued and lost, unable to afford the kind of legal team that would have made a difference. She hadn't told Jasper about it. Not because she was hiding it, but because it wasn't something she wanted to carry forward. Now it was everywhere. When he found her in the studio that morning, she was sitting on the floor, brush in hand, but not painting. She was staring at the canvas like it had betrayed her. I should have told you, she said quietly. You didn't have to. I didn't want you to think I was broken. He crouched beside her. You're not. They're saying I'm opportunistic. That I chased you for your money. That I latched on so I could relaunch my career. Do you believe that? No, she whispered. But I'm afraid other people will. He reached out, pulled the brush from her fingers, and took both her hands in his. Let them talk. We don't owe anyone our truth. I don't want this to hurt you. It won't. And even if it did, you're still the best thing that's ever happened to me. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his. What if this never goes away? Then we make enough noise with our lives that it gets drowned out. The night of her show, the gallery was packed wall to wall, but Brielle stood taller than she ever had. The pieces were darker this time, more honest. One of them, a mixed media piece layered with old court transcripts and torn sketches, was titled Unfinished Lawsuit. It sold before the night was over. She thanked every person who came. Signed Prince. Spoke on a panel when asked. But when Jasper found her later on the rooftop of the gallery away from the crowd, she was barefoot and holding a glass of champagne with both hands. "You disappeared," he said, stepping beside her. "I needed air." He looked out over the city. "You're incredible." She glanced at him. "You're biased." "I'm accurate." She set the glass down. "I want to marry you." He blinked. She turned to him fully. "I don't need a big wedding. I don't want a headline. But I want you." He stared at her for a moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out the ring she hadn't worn since Paris. "I've been carrying this, waiting for the right moment," he said. She smiled. "This feels right." He didn't kneel. She didn't cry. But when he slid the ring back onto her finger, the world felt like it clicked into place. They married in the studio a month later. Her easel stood in the corner, her latest piece unfinished. Only 20 people were invited, and half of them were artists. She wore a cream linen dress and paint on her fingers. He wore a navy suit and no tie. They exchanged vows under hanging bulbs surrounded by the scent of turpentine and canvas, and when they kissed, it wasn't dramatic. It was home. After the ceremony, they danced to a song no one else knew, barefoot on the paint-splattered floor. Later that night, curled beside him in bed, she whispered, "You were never the wrong train." He kissed her temple. "You were always the destination." Years passed. Brielle opened her own gallery tucked into the Lower East Side, where she showcased underrepresented artists and curated shows that made headlines for the right reasons. She painted less, but when she did, it was for love, not survival. Jasper stepped down as CEO 2 years after their wedding. He started mentoring young entrepreneurs, investing in companies that valued people over profit. They traveled. They argued. They made up. They adopted a dog Brielle named Sienna after a shade of paint she couldn't live without. And one spring morning, with cherry blossoms blooming outside their bedroom window, Jasper walked into the kitchen to find Brielle barefoot again, this time with a toddler on her hip and flower in her hair. He paused in the doorway, watching her hum softly as she bounced their daughter and stirred something on the stove. She looked up, saw him, and grinned. "Welcome home," she said. He crossed the floor, kissed her, and whispered, "I never left."